Chapter 66. Raon furrowed his brows. Is he thanking me? He couldn't understand it. He had shattered the strategy Keen did his best to devise, he had won against him in the duel, and he had also hit his chest in the end, so he couldn't understand why he was lowering his head to thank him. You look like you don't understand. Keen smirked, like he expected that to happen. I believed that we could defeat you guys no matter what in this all-out battle. I had identified your personalities and might before the battle was even decided so that we could win against you whenever it happened. That was indeed rather dangerous. Understanding Martha and Bayan's personalities and swordsmanship to devise a strategy against them had worked. If he hadn't sent Raon to call them back, they would have been eliminated right there. Yes. However, it was dangerous, and we didn't manage to win. I believed everything was over after a small victory. I never expected you to have a better perception than me, for you to be skilled at hiding your presence, and I didn't think Martha and Bayan would change that much. Keen sighed heavily. Lastly, I never imagined losing in a one-on-one fight against you. Aura was the one thing I was confident about since cultivating was all I did while recovering, yet I still can't believe I lost to such a small flame. He was still thinking that the 10,000 flames cultivation was weak. It was a mistake, but since he didn't really need to correct him, he didn't say anything. I really learned a lot during this battle. I have to always keep in mind that there might be someone better than me in the enemy camp, despite them being younger, and never let my guards down. He saw Keen's eyes. Those were satisfied eyes, like after filling one's stomach with delicious food. It seemed that everything he'd said so far was his honest thoughts. He isn't too bad for a member of the direct line. It was just like he'd said. One always had to consider the possibility of the enemy hiding their strength. When he was an assassin, he could be called the best because he was prepared for every possibility. I see. Raon nodded to Keen and looked around the restaurant. The 5th and the 6th training grounds trainees were now talking and laughing together like friends, all while eating the food. What do you think about while swinging your sword? I don't know about thinking, I just follow my instincts. And I already told you to scram. Even Martha, who has been acting irritated, was now responding a little after hearing so many compliments. Just a little, though. That much willpower is obvious for one who aims to become a Sieghart swordsman. Indeed. A Sieghart swordsman would let his left side get stabbed after getting hit on the right side if that allowed them to achieve victory. Bayan and Decal were laughing together with red faces, as if they were drunk. Munch munch. Raon was eating fruit after finishing her conversation with Karen. It looked like she liked the fruit, since she had a bunch of them piled up in front of her, which reminded him of a squirrel. How curious. It was strange how they could become so close after fighting each other so fiercely. He thought the atmosphere was going to be as heavy as a funeral when he first heard they were going to have a feast together, but he was completely wrong. The restaurant actually felt like a small festival. You're also weird. As he was wondering why, Keen, who was eating a chicken, snickered. Why? Aren't you curious about why those that have been fighting each other have now become so friendly? I knew it. Keen nodded, confirming his guess. Shall I tell you the answer? It's because they fought each other. I know that already. But why does fighting? No, it's not just because they fought, but because they fought under the name of Sieghart. He pointed at the trainees that were talking about that day's battle. We are all Sieghart. No one used underhanded methods, everyone did their best to fight in order to achieve victory. Everyone who clashed with their swords is aware of that fact. When Raon thought about it, it was just like he said. He could clearly feel Keen's feelings while clashing his sword with his. Victory was his only wish. Since they did everything they could, they must feel refreshed whether they lost or won. They aren't pretending to be friendly, but they actually became friends a little. Having said that, Keen drank juice as if he was drinking a beer. Is that so? He felt like he could understand the reason that they looked so close, and why he couldn't understand it, a little. Because it wasn't like this in my previous life. The all-out battles also happened as part of training when he was being raised as an assassin. However, unlike here, the weak lost their lives despite it being training. He couldn't even think about making friends, and he thanked the fact that he could live to see another day in despair. This has to be the correct way. If people that trained in the same place under the same name fought against each other with everything they had, then the result should have been what he was witnessing right now. However, what the instructors wanted him to be wasn't a human being but an obedient dog. Since the training was about killing each other, doubting and resenting each other was a natural outcome. You look so calm during the fight, just like an old warrior that had experienced all kinds of battles. Now you look your age. You're such a strange character. Keen smiled while chewing on the meat. Rather than making fun of him, he seemed to be enjoying it. Is that so? Raon smiled back. Of course, the smile had a different meaning than Keen's. I really don't know anything. He was getting stronger and stronger, and his assassination technique and experience still remained in his head, but he was lacking more than anyone there in terms of humanity. It was an ashamed smile. Ha! He sighed slowly and looked out the window. The setting sun was pressing gently on his eyes. It was probably because of the situation, or because he'd heard of something that reminded him of his previous life. He recalled his old memories. It was when he didn't even have the code name Raon. The memories of the days he struggled with a dagger in his hand in order to survive were filling up his brain. The children that were running at him in order to kill him during the real battle training. He didn't even know their faces since they were wearing masks, but they might have been able to live on like this if they hadn't been taken away to that place. They would have met friends they'd gotten along with, and laughed happily, and talked to each other. They might have faced difficulties, but they would have lived a better life than dying like that. His hands trembled in grief. That's right. Everything was Darius Robert. It was because of that damned fraud that was the previous king of the South, the Sky Sword Saint. His wrath against him filled his heart after a long time. Raon? As Raon was grit his teeth, he heard Runan's clear voice. He suddenly came back to his senses. TSK, that damn brat dares to interrupt. Wrath's voice of regret was heard from his bracelet. It looked like he had slightly stimulated his emotions in the process. You are really W8. Why are you letting go of such a nice wrath? Develop it even more. Don't you need to take your revenge? The King of Essence. Go away already. Coo. You bastard. Raon put wrath back into the bracelet. Ha! There was some interference from wrath, but those were his real emotions. He was going to kill Darius Robert, no matter what. I'm okay. MHM. He smiled lightly at Runan, who was staring at him, and she started eating fruit once again. She really looked like a squirrel when she was eating. Raon Zighart. Keen, who had already finished the chicken, called his name while tapping the table. I have a suggestion. Suggestion? How about having a match like this between the training grounds from time to time? One-on-one would also be fine, and another all-out battle like today's would be meaningful, in my opinion. The restaurant fell silent. It seemed his voice was rather loud. The trainees that had been talking were now looking at them. After looking around the children, he couldn't see anyone who disliked the idea. Martha was frowning, signaling him to decline the offer, but since she was the only one against it, he didn't care about her. Yeah, that sounds good. You are cool, I knew it. Keen hit the table and stood up. Wow. It's going to be interesting from now on. I'm not going to lose next time. What are you on about? We are going to win again next time, for sure. The trainees' voices became louder. They were all rejoicing that they made new connections. God damn it. Except for one person. Martha swore and glared at Raon. Raon ignored her gaze and looked at the right end. The important people, the ones that could decide on Keen's suggestions, were busy with something else. Wait, are you saying the food expenses here aren't the price for losing the bet? Obviously not. Did I ever tell you to pay for the food because you lost the bet? I just asked you to pay. But I already gave you money. That was the down payment. Instead of talking about the trainees' battles or what they could have done better, Rimmer and Metten were talking about the bet. That doesn't make any sense. This and that are different stories. The price for the bet is usually gold coins. Well, give it to me already. Pay for the food here as well. Rimmer extended his hand while grinning. You must be the only elf with so much greed. Ah, thank you for the compliment. Wow. I'm so angry. Metin hit Rimmer's hand with a heavy gold coin pouch. Thank you, Mr. Easy Customer, customer. Please do it again in the future. After getting the money, Rimmer stood up holding the beer glass. Hey kids, you did great today. Rest well tomorrow, see you again the day after at the training ground. He waved his hand and left the restaurant. You aren't going anywhere. Raon sneered and followed him. I can't let him be the only one benefiting from this. I win every time I bet on Raon. Rimmer was cheerfully heading over to the gambling house. Raon is my lucky boy. He was anxious because the trainees were losing one-sidedly, but in the end they met his expectations. As soon as Raon made his move, the disadvantageous situation was reversed and they achieved a perfect victory. It looked like he was never going to lose in the future as long as he kept betting on Raon. A gamble that I can win 100% of the time is a golden calf. I want to do that every day now. Such a gamble doesn't exist in the world. Ha! He hurriedly turned his head at the pleasant voice coming from behind him. Raon was looking at the gold pouch in his hand coldly. Raon? Why are you here? You should eat more. It looks like you won a lot from betting on us. And this isn't the first or the second time, right? Ugh. He was correct both times. He did earn a lot of money thanks to Raon. Like, seriously. Half. Raon raised his finger and pointed at the gold pouch. Half? Since you won thanks to us, please use half of it on us. Half would be too much. There's gonna be nothing left of it by tomorrow anyway. I might triple the money. Who knows? I've never seen you win anything at the gambling house. He snorted. Rimmer was frustrated, but he was right. However, this time was different. He had a great feeling about it. I have a great feeling. I'm going to win tenfold, and use half of it too. That won't be necessary. The half is already plenty for us. I don't want to. Everything was my. Then I'm not going to cooperate in the future. What? Since it's obvious when the instructor is placing a bet, I might lose on purpose. There's no way you are going to do such a thing. Rimmer groaned. Raon's calm eyes were telling him that he was serious. Did I go too far? Now that he thought about it, he kept winning during the spars with Bayan and Martha and kept everything to himself. I'm not asking you to give it to me, but I'm asking to spend it on the trainees. Alright. What is it? What do you need? There was something I felt during the battle against the 6th training ground. Raon smiled slightly for the first time and continued. What the trainees need is. 2 days later. What's this? A dummy? This is a dummy used for practicing swordsmanship. The trainee's eyes shone, looking at the training dummies placed on the left side of the training ground. A dummy for swordsmanship practice? Yes. When you strike the training dummy with your sword, it returns an even stronger power. I heard it's great for preparing for actual battle. Really? But why did we get these out of nowhere? The trainees tilted their heads, looking at the training dummy. The instructor bought it for us. Really? Hearing from Raon, the trainees' surprised gazes turned to Rimmer, who was lying down on the platform. You must have felt it during the previous battle, but you often lose the grip on your sword or gain wrist injuries because of the reaction while clashing swords with an enemy. He must have bought it in preparation for that. Did that gambling addict really? That means. Did he use the money he won 2 days ago for this? Instructor. The trainees approached Rimmer with impressed eyes. Even Bayan, who blatantly disliked Rimmer, opened his eyes wide in surprise. Yes. Work hard with it. Rimmer smiled helplessly, waving his hand. It's so damn expensive. The training dummy was more expensive than he thought. He didn't even have half the gold left after buying a few of them. Then he got angry and placed the rest in a bet and lost everything. He really ended up penniless, just like Raon had said. However, Rimmer's mouth curved up into a slight smile as he watched the trainees enjoying themselves while hitting the training dummies. Chapter 67. Inside an old-fashioned room filled with black, hardwood furniture, including a bookshelf, desk, and a table, the rustling sound of writing could be heard. The sound was coming from the desk. A handsome middle-aged man with long silver hair glittering like a snowfield was drawing an unknown symbol in a book full of blank pages. Mysteriously, the symbol he drew disappeared shortly after, and the book still looked as if nothing was written in it. The middle-aged man was restlessly drawing symbols. Drip. A drop of blood dripped down from the open wound on his right hand and seeped into the book. The middle-aged man stopped his hand for the first time, his gaze directed to the stain of blood coloring the white paper red. Tisk. The silver-haired middle-aged man, and the ruler of the South, the Sky Sword Saint Darius Robert, clicked his tongue. It still hasn't healed up. The injury he'd received on his hand 17 years ago, when he killed a hunting dog called Raon, still hadn't disappeared. He tried using high-quality elixirs, and asking famous healers or priests, but no one was capable of removing the sword wound. The wound didn't open up, though. The wound didn't get better or worse. As if it was telling him to remember, it was mysteriously keeping its initial form. Are you asking me to remember a ghost? Darius Robert snickered and stroked the wound on the back of his hand. The blood spilling out slowly started to subside. I'm sorry, but I don't look back. I only keep advancing forward. He picked up the fountain pen once again and started drawing the symbol into the book. Until the sun that was in the middle of the sky set then rose once again, Darius kept drawing the symbols non-stop, without moving from his chair. When Darius finally turned the last page, the black dragon drawn on the book cover was visible. It was drawn vividly, as if it was alive. It's done. Darius Robert smiled in satisfaction, looking at the completed book. There's not much left until the grand plan now. When he put his hand on the book, the eyes of the black dragon on the cover sparkled. The new year had begun. Raon was now 15 years old, and his appearance was the definition of the word elegant. He was sitting down where the charcoal kiln used to be with his eyes closed. The red haze kept shimmering on his shoulders endlessly, and frost kept emanating from his pores. With the heat and frost meeting each other, the misty gray haze was filling his surroundings. As if Raon wasn't aware of the mysterious phenomenon, he didn't open his eyes until the sun set under the western mountain. Raon, who looked like he had become a stone statue, finally started changing when the moon started rising. The red haze shimmering on his shoulders became a red flame, and the steam coming from his skin pores became frost. Sparkle! The moment the flame and the frost collided with each other and created a spark. Raon opened his eyes. His red eyes looked like they were struck by lightning as they pierced through the dark night. He clenched his fist and breathed out in excitement. Finally! Translucent messages appeared above as his voice completely cracked. One strand of the curse of frost has disappeared. 10,000 flames cultivation has reached 3 stars. Coldness of the frost has reached 3 stars. Perception of the snowflower has reached 3 stars. Fire resistance has reached 3 stars. You have reached the level of sword expert, beginner. Your aura cultivation speed grows faster. All stats have increased greatly. Swordsmanship proficiency has increased. Footwork proficiency has increased. The messages appeared one after another. I've finally reached the level of an expert. Raon checked the messages and nodded in satisfaction. Thanks to having trained continuously despite various incidents, he managed to reach the level of an expert 1 month after the new year had begun. He was only at the beginner level, which was worse than the apprentice level, but the feeling of achievement made him smile naturally. Expert? Even a sword master is an insignificant insect, yet you are seriously rejoicing that you became a mere expert? Wrath snorted in dissatisfaction. It's rare to become an expert at the age of 15. Expert was indeed an excellent level, but it could hardly be called powerful on the continent's scale. However, if one reached that level at the age of 15, it was an achievement that could shock not only regular houses and kingdoms, but also the 6 kings and 5 demons. Age? Only idiots count ages on a battlefield. A weakling is just a weakling, no matter how old they are. That's not wrong. No one would be dumb enough to go easy on someone on a battlefield just because they were young. He snickered while nodding. However, I have no intention of stopping just because I became an expert. Raon pushed away Wrath, who was provoking him, then stood up. It's light. Probably because one strand of the shackle of ice that always pressured him had disappeared, his body felt as light as a leaf and was full of energy. Status window. Raon opened up the status window after trying to move his body a little. Status window. Name, Raon Zighart. Title, First Victory. State, Curse of Frost, 5 strands. Trait, Wrath, Ring of Fire, 4 stars, Water Resistance, 4 stars, Perception of the Snowflower, 3 stars, 10,000 Flames Cultivation, 3 stars, Coldness of the Frost, 3 stars, Fire Resistance, 3 stars, Bleeding Curse, 1 stars. Strength, 55. Agility, 56. Stamina, 57. Energy, 40. Perception, 62. As soon as he saw the status window, the corners of his lips raised. The 10,000 Flames Cultivation, the Coldness of the Frost and the Fire Resistance had leveled up, and his stats had also increased significantly. It wasn't just the numbers. His mana circuit had also expanded, increasing the amount and speed of the aura he could control. I'm at the beginner level of expert, but I should be on par with someone at the apprentice level. The thought of possessing a might stronger than the level or number that was displayed made him unconsciously clench his fists. How pathetic. You are at a level that can't even handle one finger, no, not even a fingernail of the King of the Essence. Well, that's true. Raon smiled. But why are you smiling? Because you wouldn't even have said it was a fingernail before. Wasn't that your way of acknowledging my growth? There's no way the King of Essence would acknowledge a mere human. I must be right since your voice is trembling slightly. Since we've been together for a long time, I can tell what you are thinking to some extent. A human that tries to read the King of Essence's mind deserves to be crunched to the bones. Wrath's coldness burst out like a tidal wave. Whir. Raon used the 10,000 Flames Cultivation, which had reached 3 stars, to completely melt Wrath's coldness. Is that all? If you don't recover your strength soon, I'm going to eat you. Humph. Listening to your nonsense reminds me of the old days. Back in Devildom, the King of Essence had demon visitors that tried picking a fight. Ah, I should go warm up. Where are you going? Listen to the King of Essence. Training is finished. Thank you for your effort. At Rimmer's voice, Raon lowered his head while breathing heavily. Thank you for your effort. The trainees also repeated their thanks after Raon. You are welcome. Rimmer waved his hand while grinning. It looked like a half-hearted response stemming from his laziness, but it was actually his way of greeting. It looks like everyone's gotten used to it now. Raon nodded slightly, watching Rimmer, the instructors, and the trainees. After spending over 3 years together, everyone had gotten pretty close. Even Bayan and Martha, who hated him the most, now realized what kind of person Rimmer was and were softer towards him. Instructor. Since you were 20 minutes late today, shouldn't you train us 20 minutes longer? Of course, he still didn't compromise on his tardiness. Let's do that tomorrow. We've done enough for today. Rimmer smiled awkwardly and went down from the platform. Judging from the way he was stepping backwards, he was about to run away after changing the subject. The ones on duty should start cleaning up the training ground. Raon murmured that he was always the same and turned around to give the cleanup orders. Understood. Dorian, who was on duty, energetically nodded and ran to the corner that the cleaning materials had been placed. Eek. While opening the toolbox, he noticed who was standing next to him and screamed. What? Do you have a problem with me being on duty? Martha, whose black hair was flowing down her shoulders, furrowed her brows. And not at all. I'm absolutely honored. Tisk. She clicked her tongue and took the equipment for hardening the training grounds floor, starting her work before Dorian. The Martha from before would have left the chores to the collaterals or the recommended children and headed over to the direct line training herself. However, she couldn't escape the cleanup duty anymore because of Raon's orders. What are you watching? I have to clean up, so disappear somewhere else. Eek. Ugh. Martha stomped her feet and the ground trembled. The trainees that were staring at her in a daze hurriedly ran to the exit. Eek. Dorian, who was standing next to her, collapsed on the ground in shock. She's still the same. It seems you are the only one she is acting differently towards. Raon turned his head to the voice behind him. Rimmer was approaching him with a silly snicker. Didn't you run away because of Baen's scolding? Ah, I came back since there's something I forgot. Forg. Attention, everyone. When Rimmer clapped his hands, the trainees, who were running away from Martha's shout, all stopped to listen to him. I have something to tell you. When the trainees came near him, Rimmer went up onto the platform once again. I forgot something really important. He smiled awkwardly and scratched the back of his head. What is it again? Ah, you've got a second mission. The whole training ground fell silent in an instant. Mission? How can you forget about that? That guy is serious. Since they couldn't imagine he could forget about a mission, the trainees ground their teeth. Mission, huh? Raon closed his eyes. It took longer than I thought. Since they had successfully completed their first mission, he thought they were going to get their second mission sooner. However, over a half a year had passed since then. It looked like the missions weren't that frequent for the trainees. It's either the way Sieghart is raising their children is softer than I thought, or the mission is incredibly difficult. It was one of the two, but he personally hoped for the latter. That would allow him to grow up faster. It seems orcs have appeared near Cebu village, located in the southeast of Sieghart. Rimmer pointed towards Cebu village in the air. It was obvious that he didn't bring a map because he was too lazy. Getting rid of the orcs that are threatening people at Cebu village, and protecting the village is your mission. In short, it's a village protection and monster extermination mission. Orc. It's monster extermination. Monster extermination was the easiest and simplest mission compared to escort or dungeon exploration missions. Since it was easier than their first mission, the bandit extermination, the trainees cheered out loud. You are stupid for being happy about a mission. Rimmer clicked his tongue and continued. Unlike the first mission, the instructors won't come along. You guys will be the only ones going to Cebu village. Thinking and making decisions by yourselves from the beginning to the end isn't going to be as easy as you think. I have a question. Baen raised his hand. What were you even thinking, to actually forget to tell us about a mission that we will be doing by ourselves? That's not a question, but a reprimand. Rimmer broke out into a cold sweat. Ha! Baen's face wrinkled like tree bark, and he sighed heavily. Then I will ask the real question. Since you said we will be the only ones moving out, what shall we do if we meet a critical situation we can't handle by ourselves? Recognizing that is also your job. If the mission is deemed impossible, giving up on it and deciding to return is also your ability. Therefore, Rimmer's gaze glanced around the trainees, then stopped at Raon. The leader's ability is important once again. You have to decide whether you have to break through with power, devise a strategy, or run away without looking back upon facing a critical situation. Isn't it going to be a problem if we run away from a mission? Dorian raised his hand this time. It depends. If you run away from goblins, you will lose points and be disgraced. If you manage to run away from one of the 5 demons, then you deserve to be praised. Oh! Dorian exclaimed, hearing that he was allowed to run away. His cowardly personality remained the same in the new year. Understood. Baen eventually looked at Raon. With his eyes slightly shining, his expression was that of acknowledgement and slight envy. You will be departing the daybreak after tomorrow. You shall rest for today and tomorrow while thoroughly preparing for the mission. WW8. In 2 days? Dorian's eyes flicked left and right like a grasshopper. Yes. In 2 days. Why is it at such short notice? That's way too early. Since today is almost over, we've only got 1 day left. Monster extermination is an urgent mission compared to escorts or dungeon explorations. If you end up being late, Cebu Village will be the one suffering casualties. Then you should have told us earlier. Botan exploded again and stomped the ground. The day after tomorrow. Stop. Raon's low voice pierced through the center of the training ground. The instructor told us before. You can't predict when and what kind of mission you will get. Instead of being flustered and criticizing him about it, you should be preparing for the mission. The more you criticize, the more you will be played by the instructor's hands. That's right. Yes. Let's make our move for now. The trainees that were angry like Bayan nodded, and Rimmer smiled in satisfaction. I'm going to pluck off those ears one day. Martha murmured something Wrath had already said before and ground her teeth. Runan looked like none of it mattered as she stood blankly, licking her lips. She seemed to be thinking about the ice cream she would eat once she returned home. A wild orc is fiercer and sturdier than the orc you faced during battle training. Since they are also bigger in numbers, it will be a fight of one versus many. Since we've learned footwork, it will be more advantageous for us to focus on evading rather than blocking. Make your equipment as light as possible and gather here at daybreak in 2 days. After saying that, Raon turned around. Tisk. Runan nodded like a baby bird and Martha clicked her tongue, then left the training ground. Understood. The trainees that followed Raon answered loud and clear, then ran towards the dormitory. Bayan glared at the instructors for a moment, but he turned around without saying anything. The collaterals followed him towards the main building. He really looks like a leader now. Rimmer grinned with his arms crossed. Of course, he was saying that looking while at Raon's back. I know, right? I never imagined he would change that much. He is also open-minded, probably because he started from rock bottom. I've seen many children so far, but it's my first time seeing a top trainee that managed to make the others follow him based on his efforts, rather than his position or talent. The instructors approached Rimmer and nodded. All of them also acknowledged Raon. I should prepare as well. I need to start moving before the children. The youngest instructor licked his lips while watching the children walk away. They used to really send the trainees on a mission on their own, but ever since Glenn broke through the demonic wall, the second mission's rules included having instructors tag along secretly. No. Rimmer tapped the youngest instructor's shoulder, then shook his head. I'll be going. Pardon? What? Are you serious? The instructor's eyes widened. They couldn't believe the man that found teaching them bothersome was volunteering to follow them on a mission. Yes. But head instructor, if you don't get there in time when the children are in danger because you were napping. Eep. Who do you think I am? Don't you trust me? Rimmer flapped his hand, but the instructors didn't respond. That was because they could count on their fingers the number of times Rimmer wasn't late to a training period. Anyway. I'll be going, so you can rest easy. Rimmer turned around after saying that. They could hear him murmur that he was going to have a great nap as he left the training ground. He should sleep here if he wants to sleep. Why does he even want to follow them on a mission? I guess he's leaving since the head of house and the other division leaders will bother him if he stays here. Ha! The instructors snorted, realizing Rimmer's plans. His laziness is really amazing. Even though the mission was going to start in 2 days, Raon returned to the dormitory after finishing up his night training. A backpack with lightweight magic cast on it was placed in front of the room. It seemed to be a bag prepared for the mission. He is really being obvious that he doesn't care. That kind of bag was normally handed down personally, but putting it in front of the room was his way of telling him to take care of his own business since he didn't care. That's fine. Raon snickered and entered the room holding the bag. It didn't matter whether the instructors followed or not. He just needed to complete the mission perfectly, regardless of what it was. Such arrogance. Do you believe everything in the world will go your way? There are countless unexpected circumstances that can happen against you. Well, that's true. Raon nodded. Just as Wrath said, anything could happen at any time. However, since he could handle most problems by himself, he couldn't relate to that too much. You're telling me that something unexpected can happen, like how you lost to me. I really want to tear your mouth off. That's an impossible wish. Raon snickered and started to pack his bag. Since he was given a light bag, packing up wasn't really difficult. Knock knock. As he was in the middle of packing up, a knocking sound could be heard. Who is it? He opened the door, thinking that it was strange since everyone should have been busy preparing for departure. Eek! Raon's jaw dropped with his eyes widened. There were the only two people in the world that could fluster him. Sylvia and Helen were standing there, faces turning red. Raon! If you are going on a mission, you should return to the annex building and tell Mom about it. How did you know that? No way, was it Dorian again? Sir Rimmer told us. Putting her hands on her hips, Sylvia frowned. That elf, seriously. He secretly sighed. He came to the dormitory on purpose to prevent Sylvia and Helen from worrying. He didn't think he would visit them personally to tell them about it. I'm sorry. It would have been a different story if he could have kept it a secret, but since they had already realized, he didn't need to make up an excuse. It was a fact that he was avoiding them since it could get awkward if he told them he was going on a mission without an instructor, despite having time to visit them. Sylvia pouted without saying anything and wrinkled her nose. As he was about to close his eyes in preparation for her long preaching, he heard her voice. Raon. The top trainee isn't only supposed to greet others. It's a position that should lead the other trainees in a better direction. Sylvia's eyes were full of unusual seriousness. Not just yourself, but you should think about everyone before you act. The children's lives are at stake based on your decisions. Okay. Raon nodded with a bewildered expression. I didn't expect her to say something like this. He thought he would get scolded and preached at. He didn't expect her to give such advice. Monster extermination might look easy, but it's actually a difficult mission. Make sure to wipe them out completely so that the villagers won't suffer anymore. Sylvia was correct. Since the monsters multiplied very quickly, it was important to completely root them out when he was at it. Always keep in mind that the moment you are on a mission, you aren't a trainee anymore but a Sieghart swordsman. She lowered her body to meet his eyes. Her eyes were shining like stars. Mom told you before, right? The first Sieghart knew honor and shame, and was the kind of person that pointed his sword at the strong in order to protect the weak. Mom wants Raon to act like that Sieghart ancestor. Sylvia smiled, gently caressing Raon's shoulder. Aren't you angry? I'm angry. And I'm worried. I feel so frustrated. However, her expression changed in an instant. She pouted once again. It's not the right time to scold you. Be ready for some preaching once you return. Raon smiled lightly and nodded. Since Sylvia had also lived as a swordsman, she was well aware that now wasn't the right time to scold him. I'm glad that you became happier after starting to train, but I can't stop worrying about you. Sylvia hugged Raon tightly. He could feel her worries in her trembling hands. She returned after giving him a few more pieces of advice. She didn't take as much of his time as he had expected, and she didn't scold him either. While worrying about her son, she hoped he would complete the mission properly as a swordsman. That's why her voice and her words touched him deep in his heart. While packing up his bag, he looked out the window. The moonlight was permeating the room, as if it were jealous. Chapter 68. Daybreak, 2 days later. Rimmer was standing on the platform in the training ground where the sun still hadn't risen. The trainees were looking at him with eyes full of nervousness and excitement. I'm telling you for the last time. Anything can happen outside the house. You must doubt over and over. If you think it's too difficult, retreat without a second thought. Yes. His gaze was directed at Raon, who was standing at the first row. Raon calmly nodded. Then go now. It would normally take a month, but you should be able to arrive in 2 weeks since we've opened the official broad road. I wish you good fortune in battle. Thank you. Rimmer clapped his hands, just like in their usual training. The trainees bowed to him and the instructors, then turned around. Line up in 4 columns. We will be moving in the buddy groups assigned in the morning. The trainees moved in a perfect order at Raon's command. Ha! Rimmer snorted while watching them. Did he make buddy groups? Despite being a top trainee, he was still a teenager. He was surprised at his composure in him organizing buddy groups when he should have been nervous about going on a mission without an instructor. He always surprises me. He never got bored of watching Raon. He always filled him with anticipation. The most surprising thing was the 9 flowers medicine. His jaw had automatically dropped from surprise upon watching Raon take the 9 flowers medicine he got as a reward for winning against Martha. I never expected him to completely absorb it. Upon taking an elixir, some energy was inevitably wasted. Getting someone else's help to reduce that waste to a minimum was the common method of taking an elixir, yet Raon had absorbed all of the energy on his own. He was a monstrous guy in many ways. I guess they will be fine. On top of might and aura, Raon was exceptionally talented with perception. Since he had proved himself during the battle against the 6th training ground, he was going to return safely after completing the mission without much difficulty. We've finished the preparation. Raon came to Rimmer after finishing lining up the trainees. His serene eyes didn't have any sign of excitement or nervousness. How is he 15 years old? Rimmer nodded, while feeling goosebumps on his arm. Go to battle. To battle. He responded silently and left the training ground, leading the trainees. Rimmer stared at the backs of the trainees he'd raised for the past 3 years. The instructors approached him once the trainees had completely disappeared. Head instructor, shouldn't you start following them now? No. Rimmer shook his head. He yawned while grabbing the back of his neck with clasped hands. There's a guy with an inhuman perception. I'm going to take a nap first. He went to the head instructor's office after saying that. Ha! Is that okay? It might be late, but shouldn't we go after them? The instructor's worrying voices could be heard from behind him, but Rimmer smiled, pretending to not hear them. I should worry about the orcs instead of them. Raon looked back while walking at the front. The 42 trainees were moving in 4 lines, but they were divided into 3 factions. The first was the collateral faction with Ban Sieghart as center. The collaterals were following Ban as their master. The second was a faction of vassal families that opposed the collaterals. However, Runan, who should have been their center, was sticking next to Raon, which made their stance rather awkward. The third was the recommended children with commoner backgrounds. Raon had helped them back when they were temporary trainees, and they were still following him. Finally, Martha was the exception that didn't belong anywhere. After checking each trainee's expressions, Raon closed his eyes. Honestly, he didn't care what they did or what they became. Despite his status as a trainee under the Sieghart name, he didn't think he belonged to that place. He was going to leave after returning Sylvia to her position in the direct line. However, the spar against the Owen Kingdom, the first mission, and the battle against the 6th training ground made him realize that wasn't all there was to it. Since he spent a long time with them, sharing the same thoughts, he grew a bit attached to them. And Mom's words are also bothering me. Sylvia's voice, telling him to act like the ancient Sieghart swordsman as the top trainee, was still engraved in his heart. It's difficult. Probably because he had lived as an assassin, taking care of his allies was more difficult than killing and destroying his enemies. We're going to rest here. Raon stopped in front of a huge tree, thick enough that 5 grown men wouldn't be enough to hug it together. The trainees sat down, leaning their backs against the tree. I have something to tell you. As the trainees were drinking water and catching their breath, he stood in front of them. Some of you might dislike me, but I'm currently your top trainee. His calm voice stating the fact made some people clench their fists, some nod their heads, and others didn't show any reaction at all. I knew that some of you aren't taking it seriously or are excited, like you're going on a picnic, despite hearing that it's a monster extermination. Whatever you think is up to you, but that lightheartedness will make you or the person behind you into a casualty. The trainees that had such thoughts lowered their heads in embarrassment. Just as the head instructor said, We don't know what might happen during the mission. Don't act rashly, follow my orders. MHM. Yes. Raon and the recommended children answered loud and clear, and Martha and the vassal family trainees nodded. The collateral trainees stayed still, trying to read Bian's mind. Of course. Bian stood up while pouring water on his head. I already told you at the end of the battle against the 6th training ground, but I acknowledge you as the top trainee. I'll follow your order even if it might cost my life, as long as it is reasonable. However, if it will stain the Sieghart name, I won't follow your order. What is worthy of Sieghart, according to you? It's knowing the honor of a swordsman. Helping the weak, acting proudly in front of the strong, and training with everything they have, so they won't show any shameful sight. Raon met Bian's eyes without saying anything. I know. I picked a fight against you out of jealousy, and stained the Sieghart name, unable to accept the result. I'm telling you all this because I am well aware of that fact. I'm never going to display that shameful behavior ever again. Bian hit his chest with his clenched fist. It felt like his willpower could be seen in his green eyes, burning strongly. He has really changed a lot. He acknowledged his own mistake in front of that many people, and even declared his resolution. It wasn't something a 15-year-old would do. I got it. Raon nodded. It seemed he could trust Bian since he had changed that much. Putting the water he was drinking back in his bag, he turned around. Let's move again. Bian looked at Raon, who was advancing through the snowy road. He had a small back. It had a size befitting his age, since he had somewhat recovered his health, but he was still small compared to the other trainees, including himself. And yet, his size as a person was incomparable to the other trainees. He painfully realized that while observing him as they moved for the mission. The patience he displayed during training was nothing. Raon didn't get tired. No, he didn't show it despite being tired. The trainees struggled with the cold and exhaustion, but he was always composed and relaxed. Thanks to that, the trainees that were following him became less nervous and ended up expending less stamina. If he was the only one on the mission, he probably would have arrived a long time ago. It definitely wasn't a baseless guess. Raon always took a night watch despite being the top trainee. He was also the only one who didn't doze off during it. He must have gotten stronger, too. Since it was half a year ago that he defeated Keen from the direct line, who was 2 years older than him, he must have gotten even stronger. He probably reached the advanced level sword user, or even the highest level. Honestly, he couldn't help but think that he could never win against him. But I won't give up. He didn't work as hard as Raon yet, and giving up on matching up to his rival wasn't something a Sieghart would do. Bian tightly gripped his sword's handle. He came back to his senses thanks to Raon. He was going to catch up to him to return the favor. Just you wait, Raon Sieghart. Like a peacock fluttering its feathers, the different colored roofs were mingling in harmony. They were the rainbow roofs that were Cebu Village's pride. Raon and the trainees, who had reached Cebu Village in 2 weeks, were looking down at the village from the hill. We can see it over there. Finally. Phew. We can finally sleep inside. The trainees, who were tired of sleeping outside, smiled while patting their shoulders and backs. Cebu Village. It was his first time there, but he investigated it a little because of the mission. It was a small village where a small number of people lived off farming without any special products or tourist attractions. Since monsters came down once every few years, it wasn't really a special mission. In fact, there were wooden fences installed around the village in order to stop the monsters from coming in. Let's go down. Raon nodded after looking around the village and the mountains surrounding it as a whole. Yes. The trainees tightened their bags and went down the mountain, following Raon. Raon narrowed his eyes and lowered his head slightly. What? He felt chills running down his back. It was the sensation he felt every day when he was being trained as an assassin, a human's gaze. Instructor? No, it's different. It was different from an instructor's gaze, as they observed them while knowing who they were. It was the frightening feeling of someone trying to find out everything about them. No one knows. The trainees' faces were stiff with nervousness over fighting monsters. Even Bayan, Martha, and Runan looked like they didn't sense anything. I guess that's normal. It was a faint feeling that he himself wouldn't have felt if he didn't have the experience of an assassin. It would have been strange if the trainees could sense it. He rolled his eyes while lowering his head. He couldn't locate it since his aura and his perception was still too weak. Not good. He couldn't tell whether it was one of the house's trials or some other crisis. Hiding was the best course of action in such a situation. Raon went down the mountain without saying anything. As he was purposely walking slowly, the feeling scanning his neck got further away. It seemed like it was running away to report elsewhere. Now was the time. Whir. Creating a thin layer with his aura to prevent the sound from going out, he turned around. Bayan. What? Bayan raised his head, hiding his nervousness under his calm expression. During this mission, you shall be the top trainee and issue commands. What are you saying out of nowhere? Since Runan and I did everything during the first mission, you should take on the main role this time. Prove what you told me last time was true. By what I told you, you mean? That you are going to be worthy of being a Sieghart swordsman. Bayan bit his lip. Judging from his frowning expression, he was taking him seriously. The trainees were walking silently, but their ears and gazes were all directed to Raon and Ben. All right. Bayan slowly nodded. Hesitation had disappeared from his eyes. I'll clearly show you that I've changed. Let's go. Yes. He put on the pace while shouting out loud. The collaterals following Bayan were full of energy. You heard that too, right? Yes. The trainees that usually followed Raon nodded at once. Runan. MHM. Runan understood right away and looked at the vassal family trainees that followed her. Understood. The vassal families frowned, displeased with the way Bayan was getting power, but eventually nodded. Martha, I'll tell you the reason later, so consider Bayan as the top trainee for now. Lastly, he turned to look at Martha, who was standing next to him. She closed her eye and opened it again with a cold expression. You don't need to tell me. I already said I'd follow your command, so you just have to show me the results. Martha spoke and walked towards Bayan. Are the young bastards changing a little? Rath's somewhat displeased voice could be heard quietly. What arrogance! His personality was indeed the worst, as he got angry at everything and anything. You can feel the one that is observing us nearby, right? Did you notice that? I guess, since you have the King of Essences trait, you should bite your tongue and die if you don't. Where are they? And how many are they? Do you think the King of Essence would tell you his location? So, it's one person. Ha! Since you can't tell lies, his means one person. Why, you bastard? Rath trembled, boiling in anger. Even then, there's a problem. There was only one person observing them, but there was no way of telling how many they had as allies. He couldn't relax until the end. Raon licked his lips, looking at Cebu Village's wooden fence as it started entering his sight. I have a feeling this mission isn't going to be easy. Chapter 69. Upon arriving in front of Cebu Village, a head poked out over the wooden fence. It was an old man with gray hair, which showed the many years he had lived. Oh. Are you people from Sieghart? The wariness filling his angry eyes subsided upon seeing the burning sword emblem engraved on the trainees' chests. Yes, we are. Bayan, who was at the front, nodded. You finally arrived. Please wait a moment. After a thumping noise, the door opened at the left side of the wooden fence. I'm Ligaham, the Cebu village chief. We welcome the Sieghart swordsman. It seemed the gray-haired old man was the village chief as he came up and bowed. The villagers holding swords and spears could be seen behind him. We are just trainees that aren't swordsmen yet. Ligaham and the villagers strictly bowed to the trainees, who looked clearly young, which meant the Sieghart's name was famous in the village. The trainees couldn't hide their pleasure at the hospitality they've got for the first time. It was the typical display of an inexperienced beginner. Raon hid his presence, standing in the middle of the trainees. He was carefully observing his surroundings. He tried looking for the gaze he felt in the forest, but he couldn't feel it anymore. It seemed the one observing them was gone. He already ran away. It looks like it. Wrath sometimes gave him the answer out of frustration. He was a very useful guy, except for the times he tried to attack him. Please rest for now, since you must be tired from the long trip. Chief Ligaham raised his hand to volunteer as a guide for the trainees. It's fine. Bayan stopped moving after entering the village. I'm going to ask about the situation first. Please tell us about the monster's movements. You are a Sieghart after all, despite being a trainee. The village chief nodded, a deeply moved expression on his face. Bayan squared his shoulders at hearing that his actions were worthy of Sieghart. He had returned to being a child after acting all dignified. Please, look that way. The village chief pointed at the mountain on the right side. That mountain is Cebu Mountain, which has the same name as our village. Monsters appear there every year, but we've been dealing with them since they've been few in number. However, the number multiplied more than 3 times this year, and they were too much for us. How many would they be then? We've observed more than 100 of them. Taking into account those we haven't seen yet, it's safe to assume they are over 200. 200, I see. Bayan nodded, looking at Cebu Mountain. Please, rest easy. We are going to annihilate the monsters living in that mountain. Oh. Thank you. Thank you very much. The villagers bowed at Bayan and the trainees, as if the monsters had already been wiped out. Please, get up. Cebu is a village under Sieghart's influence, therefore it's our job to take care of those monsters. Bayan's face turned red with excitement, but he turned around without showing it on the outside. Since it's already late today, we are going to head to the mountain tomorrow at daybreak, before the monsters wake. Then for your rest. Before that. The village chief's voice was interrupted by Bayan once again. Please prepare a fast person to guide us on the mountain tomorrow. Of course. Please, come this way. Overwhelmed by Bayan's atmosphere, the village chief immediately nodded and started guiding them to the village hall. Not bad. Raon nodded, watching the exchange between Bayan and the village chief. I know, right? I thought that bloody-eyed brat would have asked him to kneel as soon as he arrived. Wrath murmured that it was a shame. Do you think everyone is like you? Honestly, Raon thought the same thing as Wrath. He thought Bayan was going to abuse his power, but he was only thinking about the mission, and he treated him with some respect. However, that's not the important part. Bayan and the trainees could deal with the monsters like orcs, goblins, and kobolds without his help. The important part was the scanning gaze that he felt as soon as he arrived near Cebu village. He couldn't be sure, but the gaze had disappeared in the direction of the mountain. I'll find out tomorrow. Whether it was a house trial or some other organization preparing something. After looking around Cebu Mountain as a whole, Raon entered the village hall last. At the peak of Cebu Mountain, monster footprints of various sizes were haphazardly stamped into the snow covering the ground like a blanket. However, not a single monster could be seen, and one young man was sitting on a rock. Swoosh. While the man was spinning an orc-shaped helmet with his finger, a suspicious man covering his head with a green mask surged out from the ground. Who are the ones that arrived? They are Siegharts. The green-masked man responded while bowing. Sieghart? I didn't feel such a presence. They didn't look like official swordsmen, just trainees. Any instructors? I couldn't find any. Aha, it's their second mission. The young man snickered, tapping the helmet. You didn't get found out, right? Of course. They shouldn't even have realized I was nearby. I guess. There's no way mere trainees could notice your stealth. He nodded and licked his lips. We've made sure to control the monsters, so why did they have to come here? Because the villagers are sensitive to change. They must have asked for help from Sieghart, noticing the increase in monsters' numbers. It seems we were too reckless because we thought we could find the item soon enough. The young man clicked his tongue, tilting his head back. Since we didn't manage to find it after searching through the mountain, the magic stone must be inside the village. That must be the case. Are we going to attack immediately? The man grabbed the helmet he was spinning and shook his head. No. Pardon? But it's the perfect opportunity to kill the Sieghart sprouts. It's easy to kill them, but Sieghart might find out about the magic stone's existence if we mess around with them. It will be a loss for us if we end up losing something bigger while chasing a small gain. Then, let them have some monsters. That way, the Sieghart younglings can complete their mission splendidly and return home. The man put the green helmet on his head. The helmet had buck teeth and frightening eyes carved on it like an orc's head, and a threatening murderous intent was coming from those eyes. We will attack Cebu village after they return. Kill them all without exception. The next day at daybreak, Raon was waiting near the entrance of Cebu Mountain along with the trainees. He's here. As soon as he came near the mountain, the gaze he had felt the day before had appeared once again. Is it coming from the west? Thanks to having felt it already the day before, he managed to get a rough idea of his location. It seemed he was in the west. It doesn't look like he is intending to come out right now. Raon closed his eyes and widened his perception to search the mountain. Presences big and small, they were the movements of the orcs, goblins, and kobolds that the village chief had mentioned. Since his senses as an assassin didn't notice anything, it didn't seem like there was any danger. However, he kept his senses open just in case. After examination, we've confirmed orcs, goblins, and kobolds. Bayan turned around to meet every trainee's eyes. The orcs have the stronger combat abilities, but as you've learned, the goblins and kobolds use dirty techniques like poison darts and poison smoke. You should never underestimate them. Yes. The trainees responded quietly since the monsters could pop out at any moment. The most efficient method is to move in groups, but since we lack actual combat experience, we are going to move together in order to support each other. He looked at Raon after saying that. His eyes were asking for permission. Raon slightly nodded without saying anything. Bayan thanked him with his eyes and turned around once again. Show the monsters threatening our land the power of Sieghart. Bayan drew his sword and ran up the mountain. Let's go! Wah! Giving out a loud war cry, the trainees followed Bayan. Runan and Martha went into the mountain after checking Rayon's gaze one last time. What a bunch of idiots! Wrath snorted, watching the trainees running in. Are they really shouting out loud after practicing surprise attacks until now? They are so pathetic. It was pretty much the first real battle for the trainees. That much of a mistake was understandable. It should be your first monster extermination as well. What's wrong with your heartbeat? Wrath's voice was full of irritation. It sounds like an old general's heartbeat, one who has experienced hundreds of battlefields. Instead of looking right in front of you, you are seeing many different things. That heavy sound really annoys me. It's because I'm special. Raon grinned and unsheathed his sword. Let's go, then. Ah, yes. The brown-haired young man nodded, his chin trembling. He was the villager chosen as the guide. Rayon's job was the protection of the guide, instead of fighting the monsters. Roar! Key! Upon reaching the source of screams, they were already in the middle of a battle. Stop the orcs, kill the goblins and kobolds first. Following Bayan's command, the trainees on the front line crossed their swords with the orcs, and the trainees on the back dashed ahead to slash at the goblins and the kobolds. The green wall made of monsters collapsed in an instant. There were 3 exceptional people among the trainees that were slaughtering the monsters. Button's sword, imbued with the energy of the wind, was single-handedly splitting the orc's axe. Runan was controlling the approaching monsters with frost, then cutting their throats. And finally, Martha. Wham! She was destroying everything in front of her, imbuing her sword with a tremendous amount of aura. At that rate, they were going to wipe out every monster in the mountain without much difficulty, even if he didn't interfere. Growling. While Raon was spreading his perception, 2 orcs that had escaped the trainees' encirclement ran towards him holding an axe. At the scent of blood coming from the orcs, the guide collapsed, unable to control his trembling legs. Slash! Raon stood in front of him and swung his sword. Coup! As the sword containing red energy slashed through the air, the orcs' heads fell like fruit falling from a tree. Bayan swallowed after watching the scene, and Martha's black eyes shone. Don't worry. Raon grabbed the guide's hand, the man's mouth wide open, to help him stand up. I will return you to the village without a single injury. It was the worst morning ever for Kanbar, who was 25 years old now. That was because he was chosen to be the guide for the punitive force. Is it going to be fine? He couldn't stop worrying about it. He was thankful for Sieghart's punitive force coming to help the village, but they looked way too young. Moreover, the swordsman that came with him to protect him looked even younger than any of them. His handsome appearance was bewildering, but he couldn't bring himself to trust him because of his small size. It couldn't be helped, though. Since the decision was already made, he had no choice but to obey. Kanbar went up the mountain, feeling embarrassed at being protected by a boy smaller than him. What he witnessed as soon as he entered the mountain was the children's blades wiping out the monsters. Despite his belief that it was going to be a difficult battle, the orcs, goblins, and kobolds were being annihilated, unable to do anything. That's crazy! He unconsciously gasped. An orc that 5 grown men together could barely fight against was getting beheaded like a twig. Every single one of the trainees was literally a monster. So, this was the reason. He could finally understand why the village chief was paying his utmost respect to those young children. They were completely different people from commoners like him. When he could finally relax after regaining his composure, 2 orcs came running at him from the left side. His legs wouldn't move from the stench of their breath. Wah-ah! When he collapsed on the ground with his head going blank, the boy who'd been silent so far stepped up. He drew his sword and swung. It was a simple movement, as if he was cutting already dead meat, and the 2 approaching orcs' heads fell off. Hi! Kanbar's teeth chattered, with his eyes wide. What was that? The simple and light swordsmanship made him forget about the other children's great display of power. He didn't look like a child, he looked like an old general that had gone through hundreds of battlefields. Despite knowing nothing about swordsmanship, he could clearly see that the boy was special among them. After that, the blond, red-eyed boy next to him observed the surroundings without standing out as they climbed the mountain. He wasn't doing anything special, but he was preventing any danger from occurring while observing the whole situation. This boy is the real one. It was something one could only tell by looking up close. The best among the children, numbering over 40, was the boy that looked the youngest. Was your name Kanbar? As he was observing him with admiration, the blond boy spoke to him. Ah, yes. That's right. Sir Swordsman. He unconsciously addressed him with utmost respect. Are there any legends about this mountain? Legend? Yes, something like a great treasure's existence, or some exceptional monster residing here. Ah, there's one actually, although it was supposed to be a few hundred years ago. There's a story of a goblin king coming from the west, fighting the Knights Order in this mountain. Is there anything like a treasure? There was a story about the Goblin King's ring that wasn't found afterwards. I see. The boy's eyes shone in red for an instant. That's it. The moment he heard the boy murmuring to himself silently, chills ran down his spine. Chapter 70. Slash. Raon cut off the head of the goblin that was about to throw a poison needle at the guide. He also cut the next goblin that was trying to attack him in half. Thank you. He nodded at Kanbar's thanks and spread his perception more precisely. He is in the east now. The gaze observing all the trainees could now be felt from the east. It seemed he had moved from west to east. I finally remembered where I felt that gaze before. Raon kept his mouth shut tight as he shook off the blood from his sword. It was from Eden. Eden was one of the 5 demons commonly referred to as the continent's darkness, and they were a group full of lunatics that were arguably the craziest among all kinds of organizations that existed in the world. Their goal was restoration. They believed the era of despair, where the humans used to be hunted by monsters and discriminated against by the other races, was the Eden. And they wanted to revive the monsters' god to return to that age. Eden was literally a group of lunatics. Unfortunately, they weren't just crazy. They also possessed a strong power, keeping up with Sieghart. They could control monsters like tamers or use the monster's ability with a human's body. Even the continent's prestigious houses didn't know how they could use such strange power. However, Raon knew Eden's secret. Thanks to Darius Robert. He clashed against Eden because of a magic stone retrieval mission he gave to him, and 10 groups of shadows, 90 people total, were completely annihilated. He was the only survivor from that hell. But how did that bastard even learn about it? When he thought about it, Darius already knew from the beginning that Eden used magic stones. Raon couldn't understand how he learned that fact and didn't disclose it, despite being one of the 6 kings. Hey, what are you thinking about right now? I can feel a deep and intense wrath. Wrath burst up from the bracelet, along with a strong chill. Raon frowned. He wasn't sure whether him boiling in anger as soon as he thought about Darius Robert was a good thing or not. Ha! He sighed to subside his anger and sensed the gaze that was still fixated on them. He's probably looking for the Goblin King's magic stone. According to Kanbar's story, a magic stone must have formed as time passed after the Goblin King's death. There were different kinds of magic stones, but the Eden bastards only looked for magic stones from monsters powerful enough to be renowned. I now understand why the monsters are absent-minded. Eden was letting them kill the monsters so that the trainees, including him, would return quickly after completing the mission. They have no intention of attacking us. It seemed Eden wasn't planning to show themselves, either in order to avoid Sieghart's attention or in preparation for the instructors or swordsmen that might have followed them. It must be an important item since they're going this far. The Goblin King's magic stone must have been an extremely important item for Eden. Anyway, for now. Raon furrowed his brows while beheading the orc that was approaching him. I have no choice but to return without dealing with them. The moment he touched the magic stone that must exist in the mountain, every Eden member in the surrounding area was going to attack them at once, like a swarm of bees. He might be able to survive, but the trainees and the villagers would certainly die. Therefore, it was best to avoid doing anything stupid like poking a beehive. The best course of action was to just kill the monsters and return, pretending he didn't notice anything. The monsters are running away. Chase them until the end. He raised his head, hearing Baan's energetic voice. Let's go. It will be over soon. Raon gave Kanbar, who had regained his composure, a fake smile. His tongue felt slightly bitter, as if he had chewed on a tree's root. The monster extermination had started in the daybreak and continued smoothly. They managed to reach the top of the mountain before the sun set. Key. Hearing the orc shaman scream from where it was standing at the top of the mountain, the orcs, kobolds, and goblins came running at them. They looked like a swarm of green bees. This is the last. Baan pierced the sky, taking up his blood-covered sword. A rat can bite a cat if it is driven into a corner. Don't be careless until the end. Baan rushed out, surrounding himself with green aura, and the trainees kicked the ground with a war cry. Ha! Raon also ran ahead, leaving Kanbar behind, in order to slice the monsters. He moved in a way similar to the other trainees, lowering his sword skills. Keep watching. He had recognized the owner of the gaze. He was an Eden scout called Red Eye Demon. He possessed the scouting ability of the monster Search Eye, which was just a small floating eye that was the size of a sparrow. We are almost there. Baan shouted while cutting through the orc shaman's flame. The moment he rushed to the orc shaman, a gigantic sword fell from the sky. Crash! Along with a thunderous noise that shook the mountain, dust spread out at the same time. Whoosh, whoosh. Once the dust faded, Martha, who was sticking the deflated orc shaman to the ground with her sword, could be seen. It's mine, okay? Tisk. Bayan frowned, but quickly realized the situation and turned around. The orc shaman is dead. The rest are small fries, so wipe them out completely. Wah! With the anticipation of successfully completing their first battle, they swung their swords using all the remaining aura. Slash! After easily killing the orcs around him, Raon returned to Kanbar. He called him after creating an energy barrier, so that nobody could hear him. I have a question about the story with the Goblin King earlier. Yes. Kanbar bowed and answered. Has a gem or a treasure ever been found in the mountains since the Goblin King died? That's... Kanbar took his time, without responding immediately. It has. Yes, indeed. I shouldn't lie to my benefactor. The village chief brought a red gem from the mountain when I was little. Where is it now? The village chief buried it under his house as far as I know, and the village grew warm afterwards. I think most people don't know about this fact. That's... Raon bit his lip. This is a completely different story now. If Eden couldn't find the gem after searching in the mountain, they were definitely going to attack Cebu village next, since those lunatics didn't have much patience. We've won. First mission, success. Wah! Shouts of victory came from the trainees, who managed to occupy the top of the mountain after annihilating the monsters. Humph. Bayan looked at Raon as he held his sword. His expression was telling him he'd accomplished the mission Raon gave to him. Without responding to Bayan's gaze, Raon furrowed his brows. He had too many things to think about. Yeah! Bayan shouted louder than anyone. It looked like he thought Raon had acknowledged him through that attitude. Runan also seemed happy about the victory as she nodded slightly. It's so loud. Martha looked at Raon, picking her ears as if it wasn't a big deal. After watching the trainees that were shouting, Raon looked down at Cebu village. His frustration only grew stronger upon seeing the smoke rising from the roofs of various colors. If they ever learn about the fact that the magic stone isn't in the mountain, but in the village. Only thing left in that village would be the smoke. A festival was held as soon as they returned to the village. The villagers were full of smiles, as they didn't need to worry about the monsters for a while now. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you. The village chief and the villagers bowed to every single one of the trainees and thanked them. It was our job. Bayan shook his hand, smiling in happiness. His expression was as bright as a magic lamp, as he had perfectly completed the mission without a single casualty. Thank you for working hard for our village. The village chief also bowed to Raon, who was standing at the back. This guy told me Sir Swordsman was really outstanding. Thank you for protecting us. I honestly thought he wasn't very trustworthy at first, but he really is excellent with his sword. The village chief smiled, pointing at Kanbar, and Kanbar also smiled. No problem. Raon smiled plainly. The village chief and Kanbar thanked him once again and went to the other trainees to thank them. Ha! He felt uncomfortable after seeing their eyes. He wanted to tell them about it, but the entire village was currently under observation. The slightest mistake could get everyone killed. Aren't you feeling well? Runan tilted her head, sitting next to him. Do you want to eat ice cream? She tried taking out the rectangular box from her chest. I'm fine. Raon shook his head with a smile. Okay. Runan put the box back in its place with a regretful expression. It seemed she wanted to eat the ice cream together to rejoice. Her cute thoughts made him smile. What are you doing? Why are you missing the opportunity to eat the ice cream? That's not the important thing right now. Nothing's more important than the ice cream. Call the girl back right now. HAAA. Raon forced Wrath back into the bracelet, who was angrier than when he laughed at him. So? He raised his head at the voice heard from the top of the tree. Martha was looking at him, holding an apple. Did it go as you wanted? I'm still not sure what you wanted, though. I'm not sure either. Raon shook his head. He had nothing to say for now, nor could he say anything. Don't worry. No matter what happens, I'll follow your command until the end of the mission. Martha went down after meeting his eyes. Get away. She sat at the center of the table where the food was being brought out. She seemed to be her usual self. Let's go, too. Raon stood up and signaled Runan with his chin. MHM. Runan nodded and walked up to the table. All kinds of tasty-looking foods were displayed. There were so many that he felt like the villagers must have strained themselves. There is still plenty of food left for you. Please eat to your heart's content. Thank you. Please enjoy. Accepting the village chief and the villagers' cheers, the trainees raised their hands and started to eat like a storm. Ha! Raon sighed softly. He felt uncomfortable about the food and the people's smiles alike. Tomorrow is going to be an important day. The next morning, Bayan left Cebu village, leading the trainees. The villagers kept following them for over 20 minutes and waved their hands. I think everything ended well. Bayan smiled, walking up the hill where they could see the village underneath. It was perfect. They managed to perfectly wipe out the monsters in Cebu Mountain without any fatalities or injuries. All they had suffered were a few light wounds, so it could be considered perfect for his first time. He took a glance in the back. Raon was walking while looking down, with a thoughtful expression on his face. Without asking him to return the command, he kept following silently. But of course, there was no flaw in his command. It was a perfect strategy except for Martha killing the orc shaman in the end. I don't know what he wanted to see, but he must be satisfied. Raon gave him the command, telling him to act like a Zighart. He couldn't have any complaints, no matter what he had wanted. Let's walk faster. With their chests filled with satisfaction, Bayan and the trainees walked towards the north, where Zighart's domain was located. When the sun started moving down from the middle of the sky after walking for over 5 hours, Raon Zighart, who had been silent, stepped forward. Stop, everyone. Why, out of nowhere? Bayan closed his mouth upon seeing Rayon's eyes. The eyes, burning in red, were suffocating him. The real mission starts now.